Rabbi Isai, welcome back to Yerushalmi Masechet Shabbos. We are holding at Perek 11. So just a reminder that it is time for the Torah Anytime fundraiser on President's Day in America, which is roughly middle of February. And I've been asked, and apparently above my share on the website, above there'll be some banner and some contact, whatever. You can always get in touch with me. Hopefully to pay some money towards Torah Anytime so that they can pay for all the bandwidths of the 1.1 million users a year and I don't know what else. Also, they're bringing in Tati, which of course is the AI version for Torah Anytime. So you can ask it, where did Rabbi Cohen mention in Shir about this and this? And it will give you the answer. And they're bringing out also some sort of portable software. You can have all the shiurim on a disc or something like that. Some various things, various costs. So they've asked us all to raise money. They've asked me to raise $10,000. We'll see. Wherever we get, we get. Okay. I'm grateful to my daughter who's starting me off yesterday. Zorek, we are holding Ayin Chesam and Base. Is that right? Now, we've spoken about the Melacha of Haitzah, various things. We're carrying on with Haitzah. Zorek V'Shus Yachid V'Shus Rabin. You throw from the house to the street. V'Shus Rabin V'Shus Yachid. From the street to the house. Chayav, you're liable. V'Shus Yachid V'Shus Yachid. If it's private to private, V'Shus Rabin B'Em, the public in the middle, then Rabbi Kiva Machayev, Rabbi Kiva obligates. So you're walking and it's gone over the airspace of Rosh Hashanah, and then Rabbi Kiva says you are liable. But the Chachamim, however, say you are not liable. Right? This is the idea of Kluta Kavish Olcha. Rabbi Kiva holds, if it goes through the airspace, it's as if it landed and then jumped up and carried on flying, right? So Rabbi Kiva holds private to private with public in the middle. It's as if you threw it and it landed in the public domain. That's why Rabbi Kiva says you're chayav. As if it gone into the floor of the street. However, the Chachamim don't hold of this idea. They say no, it needs to actually land. You can't virtually land it. It has to absolutely land. So if you're throwing from the house to the house through the street, you're not liable because it didn't rest in the street. Okay, so that's the machlokes there. As over just a yachid, you're throwing from the house. Why from the house to the street? Is malachi yachid min atozrika teledas hatzai. It's a told of malachi. Now, what cases? Lo shania. Now, there's no difference between throwing private domain to the public domain. Ben al dati de Rabbi, ben al dati de Rabbanan. According to both of you, are liable. V'hu shanacha. Definitely, if it landed, if you throw from the house to the street and it lands. Now, Mishusa Rabim Mishusa Yachid. Now, what about from the street to the house? Is machlokes. Adati de Rabbi, according to Rabbi, afilu lo nacha. Even if it doesn't land in the house, you are liable because it's considered as if it's landing. Once it goes into the house through the door, it's as if it's landed. Adati de Rabbana, according to Rabbi Shanacha. No, it needs to land. Rabbi Baba Achad Shemra. Like Rabbi. When did Rabbi say you're liable for throwing it from the street to the house and it goes in the air of the house? Because there's a roof over there. But if you throw it into a yachid which is not makura, so just an open walled area which has got no roof, then Rabbi says you're not liable unless it actually lands. So Rabbi holds the idea of it being included and landing on the ground, there must be a roof above it. Right? Not like Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva said there doesn't have to be a roof. It's considered going in the airspace. Mil said Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to see in a minute. He seems to say that Rabbi obligates one who throws from the street and it goes through the Rosh Hashanah even without landing. I feel like Eida Bakura. And even if there's no roof, he says Rabbi holds like Rabbi Kiva, you're chayav going through the airspace of a house even without roof. So it says in Gittin that the husband is at the roof of his house. The wife is in the courtyard down below. He throws her a get. She is divorced. That's providing the get goes down and goes into the area of the courtyard. Yeah, the airspace of the courtyard. And she is divorced. Rav Ali Baikur Rav Yochanan, he says, Masisa to Rabbi, is this Mishnah only according to Rabbi? To Rabbi Avad, Rabbi is the one that as far as Shabbos treats Avir, the airspace, Mechitzas Kemamashan, like as if it's the Rosh Hashanah itself, because it's gone through the airspace of the walls. Amalei, he answers back, Divrei HaKol, you know everyone holds this, because Hachab Gittin, here in Gittin, even the Chachamim who argue as far as Shabbos, and say if you throw it, you're not liable because it's until it actually lands on the ground, they agree as far as giving a get, she's divorced as long as it's gone into the airspace of her courtyard, even if it didn't actually land. Now, So we're saying from here that he argues on the Rav's view of Rebbe. Now, if Rabbi Yochanan held that Rebbe says you're liable for Shus Yachid, which is a roof, so Visivine, then he could have answered back to Ravimi. He says Rebbe said his view only with Makura, with a roof, with Shus Yachid, with a roof. But then you're telling me they did have Shus Yachid ain't a Makura, not with a roof. You're talking about a courtyard, but there's no roof. So why are you bringing a thing for Rebbe from there? How can you say they did in the Mishnah Machlokes Rebbe and Rabbanan? The fact Rabbi Yochanan didn't answer that, it must be that according to him, Rebbe was said even with Shus Yachid, which did not have a roof. Now, the Gemara explains the tshuva of Rabbi Yochanan to Ravimi. The Chachamim agree you throw it on Shabbos Yochayv only when it lands, and they agree the woman's divorced as soon as it goes in the airspace. Mabe Gitin, Mabe Shabbos. What's the difference between the two? Aravila, the Shabbos Kasev, Lo Tasu Kol Malacha. Shabbos, he mustn't do any work. The Nas is here, and putting the item in the private domain, Me'elah, happens of his own accord. But Ramahacha with the get, Latara Amra B'Nasan B'Yada, Tosis give the get in her hand, which will say in her domain. And you don't have to give it to her hand. So as long as it's gone in the airspace of her courtyard, then it's in her reshus and she is divorced. Okay, now we're coming to the machlokes from Akiva and Chachamim in our Mishnah. You're throwing something from the private domain to a private domain through reshus Rabim. Shmuel Laishon. When did Rabbi Akiva say you're chayav throwing it from private to private through the public domain? Ela lamata masara. So now he's saying, look, you got to say that it's as if it's landed on the ground. It's got to be near the ground. It's got to be within 10 tefachim of the ground. Because remember, Reshus Rabim is only the first 10 tefachim. So as soon as it goes Reshus Rabim, it's considered landing, close to Kamisha Uncha, but within 10 tefachim of the ground. Above 10, also, it's only Asar B'Nei Rabbanan according to Rabbi Akiva. Above 10, there's no Reshus Rabim. We don't treat the Zorek from private to public domain in such a case. From Rabbi Lazar it applies. I feel it a even above 10 is still chayav. To Ravina B'Shem Rabbi Lazar, he said, let's see what Rabbi Lazar said. Me'agalos, from the wagons that the Levim took the boards, the crushing of the Mishkan. Lama Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva allowed to be chayav, to obligate one who throws from private to private through the street. Now, now they're standing on these wagons and they're throwing boards to each other. So where are they throwing? Now the wagons are tall, so they're throwing things in the air above 10, right? That's where we learn it from. So Rabbi Akiva's machayev the thrower, even if it's above 10 tefachim from the ground. Now, the one says machlokes Shmuel and Rabbi Lazar, machlokes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. It depends on the gist of the following Mishnah. Is Tani. Some learn that the Mishnah. Now this is a din. The Mishnah will be explained. It's talking about passing something and throwing something from private to private through the public. And someone will learn it's above 10, and it begins with the word Kesar. We're talking here about the Mishnah. If you want to find it for a second, it's on Pei Amud Aleph, right? And notice now, see, we had our Mishnah, which spoke about passing things from private to public, and then Halacha Bey says Kesar in our Mishnah. If you look at it on ATA, for example, Kesar. So you have two balconies opposing this on one on each other's side of the street, and you pass something or you throw something in your pottle. If they're both on one side of the street, passing is chayev and throwing is pottle, because that's the way the Levium did things. Yeah, so the Mishnah later on has got the word Ketzad, which implies it's going connected to what we have here. So back to our Gemara now. So is to know some learn that the Mishnah coming up, which talks about passing and throwing something private to private through the street above 10, begins with the word Ketzad, is to light on these cases. And some leave out that word Ketzad. According to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Akiva said, they argue we are throwing house to house through street above 10. Is Khan Ketzad? He has the word in Ketzad in the Mishnah coming up. And according to him, the coming Mishnah carries on, talks about the view of the Chachamim. According to Shmuel, that they're arguing only below 10, less Khan Ketzad. He cannot learn the word Kesad because according to him, the Mishnah coming up is a new thing and it's not a continuation of our Mishnah. Right? So according to Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim argue something that was thrown through the street above 10. And the question is, do we learn Zorek from Moshe, throwing from passing and so on? And the coming Mishnah which obligates if you're passing it above 10 and exempts one who throws it, is like the wagons. They were above 10 from 10 Tvachim, and explains the din according to the Chachamim, and you can have the word Ketzad. The other Girsa, which doesn't have Ketzad, fits in like Shmuel. The Rebbe Kiva and Chachamim argue when it's within 10 Tvachim of the ground, and Kluta or not Kluta. And according to them, carrying above 10, which the following mission talks about, is a new din. And it's not, you can't use the word Ketzad, it's not connected to what we have here. Okay, let's carry on. Rav Yitzchak, where are we? Rav Yitzchak, Rav Lazar, is that where we are? Yeah. Shah, he asked, look, if someone forgets it's Shabbos, and Zarak, Meshus Hayach, and Shus Rabim, so you throw from the house to the street, and after you throw it, Nizka, you remember, Adchuhu Shus Rabim, that actually, you remember it's Shabbos, while the item was still in the airspace of the street before it landed on the ground. So when you remembered, you can't be mechayev him on the throwing because then it's not shogeg anymore. And minadin, he's not chayev on the throwing because it wasn't done a hanacha in a state of shogeg. So he realizes while it's in the air. Yeah, he throws it and realizes while it's in the air. Now he's done what he's done. Obviously he can't go and get it and stop it going, but he's not shogeg anymore. Al da'ati Rav Akiva. According to Rav Akiva, it's as if it's landed as soon as it's in the air, as if it's landed. So the thing landed in the street before he remembered that today's Shabbos. So Yaseh Kamisha Nacha. Will it be like it's landed already, because Rabbi in the street, and it'll be chayav for that throwing, because it's as if it's landed the first second in the street it landed. Rav Chuda, Loichi Rav Akiva, no. Rav Akiva did not mechayev one who throws from house to the house through the street. Only that the item is resting basically in the second domain. It's not kluta, but we learn Zarek from Moshe. You throw from the house to the street. You remember before it landed, your potter, the malacha was not finished when it was shogeg. So let's see this again. Basically, it's got to land in the other place. That's what he's saying. It has the chiyuv can only come when it actually lands in the second Rishus HaYachid. It's not kluta. It doesn't know it as if it's on the ground. Zarek Mimoshit. So you're throwing from the house to the street, you're potter because the malacha didn't finish in a state of shogeg. Now, Rebbe Vo, 1 second. Now, what about Rebbe Vo? You're in the street. You throw something above 10. We said, look, where would it fall virtually? Well, where did it fall actually? If it lands within 4 amas of when you threw it, then you're potter. If it landed more than 4, then you're chayav. Even if some of it was above 10, you're liable. But Shmuel learned the brisa. If you throw something the private domain is in the middle. We imagine where did it fall? If it falls within 4 amas of throwing, then potter. So basically, we're excluding. It's going from street to street with a house in the middle, right? And we're saying, look, if it landed within 4 amas from where you threw it, without the private domain area, we're not including the house that it's gone through. We're not looking at that 4 amas. We're looking at 4 amas in the street. Then you're potter because it didn't go 4 amas in the street. But if it went 4 amas in the street, chayav, you are liable, even though it was done by 2 streets. So you start in one street, you throw it 2 amas, then it goes through the house, then it's 2 amas in the following street. So those 4 amas, you've thrown it 4 amas in the street. So you're chayav. Tama, there we say, there we say, basically, Rishus Rabim doesn't join with other Rishus. So the inner domain, the private domain between the 2 streets, doesn't make up the share of 4 amas. He doesn't get included in that 4 amas. I need it in the street. You need 4 amas in the street. But here you're saying Rishus Rabim Sarefes, that Rishus Rabim joins up with a Mokum Patur to be Mechayev. We're saying the item has gone, above 10 Tvachim, and it's tied to the share of 4 amas, even though it's flying above 10 Tvachim, that's included in the 4 amas. But above 10 Tvachim is Mokum Patur. But we're including that in the distance. Amrav Chuna, Tamam, in the case of the Brisa, Shim Tippo. Look, if the item fell to the ground when it's going between the 2 streets, Karka Tachta, the land underneath it, where it would have landed, is Rishus HaYachid, is a private domain. So that area can't join up with the distance of the streets to be Mechayiv you. But in here, in Rav Yochanan's case, Shim Tipo, look, it's going through the air, above 10. And we say that gets included in the distance. But it's above 10. You know why? Because if it fell, it would be on the ground. Shim Tipo, right? If the item had fallen to the ground while it's moving, what is the land underneath? It's the street. Rishus Rabbim. Therefore, it joins in a makom to with the distance where Rishus Rabbim is going to be Mechayiv and Zarek. Tani learned in the price of Shem Yehuda, Zarak. If you throw an item from private domain to a public domain, and the item went Abba Amos Rishus Rabbim, 4 hours in the street before it landed, you are Chayav 2 chatais. So one you're throwing from this house to the street, and it's going 4 hours in the street. Rav Yehuda Avad Abba Amos Rishus Rabbim leMelacha lefnei atzma. He treated 4 amas in the street as a malach in his own right. It's not a tolda. He said, therefore, you have two chatais, right? 2 ab malachas. If it wasn't an ab on their own, just a tolda, you wouldn't be mechayiv an extra chatas. So he treats it as 2. Al da'ate Rav Yehuda, aboy malachas in, and that makes 40 malachas. The nisnin, and we should have mentioned it in the list. So he says, no, we don't want to mention things unless everyone agrees with it. No, 4 amas in the street that's an ab malacha only according to Yehuda, so the Mishnah didn't mention it. Rav Zeir Rav Yoshia, Shem Rav Yochanan. V'tavra Yerias Lama Rav Yehuda. Yehuda learned his din that 4 amas in the street is an av. He learned it from those who were sewing in the paroichases and things in the Mishkan, right? Right? They would throw the needles back and forward, right? Tavra Yerias Mizakan Samachtin Elu Le'elu. They would throw them back to each other when they borrowed one from the other. Right, making the urias and their stitching was done in the Machne Levia, which was Rishus Rabbim. They sat at a distance of 4 amas, not to hurt each other with their needles, which they would distance the needle from the uria to pull the thread and to strengthen the stitches. And they would throw their macha one to another when one needed to borrow the macha from his friend. So in the case of the Mishkan, they were throwing 4 amas in the street. V'lav Karmelis he. Now the area where they sat surely it was a Karmelis. How can you learn from that 4 hours in the street? They would throw everything not on the side of the urias, but on their sides, and that area was Rishus Rabbim. They wouldn't throw it where the urias were, which people couldn't really walk on. Would throw it on their sides. Halacha base. Is that right? We are Daf Pei Amud Aleph. Is that right? Yeah, good. Okay. Kesad. Now, so whether you have the word Kesad or you don't have the word Kesad. We're learning about throwing and passing something from a private domain to a private domain of Rishus Rabbim. Now, remember, there's 2 examples here. You can have a house, street house, or you can have, let's say a house, the street goes one way, and there's a tiny little street going between the houses as well. But you can have a case where the 2 houses are next to each other, with a little street in between, or you can have, like, say, a wider road where one house is on the other side of the road. Now, there may still be a Rishus Rabbim in between the houses when they're next to each other, but there's a difference in din here. So, Kesad. Imagine you have 2 balconies facing each other over the street. So, one house here, one house the other side of the street. So, in that case, passing something across or throwing something across, Rishus Rabbim is potel. However, when you have 2 houses on the same side of the street, you hear me? Same side of the street, there is still a Rishus Rabbim between them. I suppose there is still some sort of public area. It may not be the whole street, but it might be some sort of little public lane or something like that. But they're on the same side of the main street. Moishit, then if you're passing something over that little lane, you are chayav. But hazorek, throwing it there, you are potel. Yeah, then you are potel. So when they're on the same side of the street, moishit is chayav. When they're the opposite side of the street, then both of them are potel. Now, it's all down to what their Levim used to do. Why is it when they're together, the same side of the street, and Hashota passing it, you're chayav, but not Zrika? Shikach Haisa, but it's Levim. It's what Levim used to do. They're standing one behind the other in the street. And Moshe and Akroshim, the Levim are passing these boards from the back of one wagon to the wagon behind it. Now here, you're passing something from private to private domain, and they're both on the same side of the street. I mean, they're two wagons, they're both on the street, basically it's the same side of the street. Abalai Zarkin, they would never throw these boards. Therefore, you're not chayav on passing them, and you're not chayav on, they never threw them from Agola to Agola, therefore you're not chayav only on passing it and not on throwing it. So if there are two houses next to each other, you're chayav for passing it and not throwing it. I always had it hard. So there's the street and there's the street. So what's the difference? You have to say that on the side there's only a little lane or something, as opposed to the main street. They're not two houses in the opposite side of the street. Now, I want you to imagine, now when you have a pit in the ground, so you think, well, what is the wall of the pit? You might think all the area, the whole ground is the wall of that pit. So we're talking about a case here where there's a pit. Imagine it's in the ground, but we're not saying the whole earth around it is the wall of that pit. It's got a unique wall built for that pit, okay? And we're only focusing now on that wall that we built around the pit, not the massive piece of earth that's all around. Or it might be a pit in the air or something, and it's got a wall surrounding it. And we're focusing on the Rishus HaYachid aspect, and we're using the area in the pit or the area of the wall around it. As I say, there's an area around it that's called Chuli Asabar. So you've dug some earth, and you've got like a fence, maybe around the boy, maybe it's some sort of fence around the entrance to the pit. The cellar and a rock which is in the street, if they're 10 high and 4 wide, 4 by 4, it's a private domain. If you take from them, you put in it something you took from the street, you are chayav. However, if this wall around the pit or the rock is not 10 high, it's not 10 high, it's not 4 wide, then if you take Rishus Rabbim and put into it, you are potter, because it's not Rishus HaYachid. Now, the Mishnah spoke about the 2 balconies, one against the other in the street. You are potter, and it's mashma that throwing or passing is only potter from carbon, but you shouldn't do it. Rabba, by less can potter, he said, no, it's not that you're potter, it's completely permitted to do it on Shabbos, because Adate de Rav, according to Rav, Lemala Masara is mutter. He had above 10 tvachim, is absolutely fine. Adate de Shmuel, Lemala Masara is also still forbidden. Rav Ilav Shirish Lakish, Behu. Now this did. It surrounds, the street surrounds each one of the 2 Rishus Mikol from all sides. That's how the wagons were in the Midbar, when the Leviim passed the Kroshim. Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, Rabbi Yochanan, he says, Afilu, even if Rishus Rabbim is only on Ruach Achas, on one side of the private domain, that's the side that you're passing it. You don't need a Rishus Rabbim all the way around the house. As long as on the side where you're passing it, you have the Rishus Rabbim there. I mean, in any guys. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute, the chiyuv of passing it is learned from the passing that was done on the wagons. And there, Rishus Rabbim surrounded all the wagons from all sides. So therefore, the chiyuv Moshe should only be if the Rishus Rabbim is surrounding the house on all sides. But Agolos, the Gemara answers, wait a minute. But Agolos, the wagons, aren't they above 10 tfachim? Above 10, above the ground of the street, is not Rishus Rabbim anyway, it's Makom Patur. So even passing in the midbar was private to private through Makom Patur. So how can you work that the domain that surrounds the wagon above to below 10 tefachim is Rishus Rabbim, which will limit the Chiyuv Moshe only in the case of Rishus Rabbim surrounding it. At the end of the day, they're above 10 and it's all Makom Patur. When you're passing it from balcony to balcony, you're chayav providing alidei shnayim. One is on one balcony and passes the other one on the other one. If one person takes an item from one and he himself puts it down, he's potter. Now, usually you say shnayim she'asu b'turin, 2 that do something is potter. In the Bible, Shania, you know why it's different? This is what the Leviim did. One Levi will pass the board to the other Levi. And since, therefore, the Malach is done, Ashot of Mishkan, we cannot be Mechayev only in this situation. Okay? Right. What do they do? 2 wagons, one after the other in the street, Mashit and Esakroshim, would pass the beams, Mezulazu, from one wagon to another, Abalai Zarkin, they would not throw the beams from wagon to wagon. Why not? So I didn't have a Russian design. You can't treat ridicule to the beams. You have to give them respect. Now we spoke about the wall of the pit, which is 10 tefachim high and 4 wide, and you take something and you put it in the street. You're chayav. Ha'aymed. So the standing bit. And it could be this wall is at the surface of the pit. Possibly, I don't know. I seem to understand it's actually level with the pit, but we'll see. Ha'aymed. The part which is standing, so that's the thickness of the wall, the chalal and the gap of the pit, the space inside, the area inside, mistarfin barbo, they join up to make a shell 4x4 tvachim. Providing that wall is rabba la chalal, is more than the actual space inside. If the space is much bigger than the walls do not join up to make it into Rishus Yachid. Rav Zira asked, now you say the wall is going to be more than the space. Do you need the wall on one side and the wall on the other side, each one on their own, rabba more than the actual space inside, or maybe the two join up together? Rav Yossi, Pshita, one thing's clear. Rav Zira, look, one side does not enough. One space, if you only have this wall on one side, it doesn't join. The well doesn't join up to the wall to make up a 4x4 tvachim, even if that wall is a bit more than the well. If it's only on one side, it doesn't join up. And also it's clear to him that at least that the wall on one side, rabba, must be more than the space. That's clear. What was his question? Even if the wall on the second side has to be thicker than the space to make the space join up to the wall. So is it like the second side as well? One side is enough, or even the second side? Very good question. We have no answer. So is it enough that the wall on one side of the pit is wider than the hole, where one side is let's say 2.5 tefachim, the hole is 1 tefach, and the other one is half a tefach. So maybe that's good enough. Or do you need each one of the two sides to be wider? Okay, good. Let's carry on. Chulias Habor. Is that where we are? Yeah. The wall of the pit, Masela, and the rock, about 10x4. We said less than that. You're putting it down your potter, which was the Yachid. What are we talking about here? If this wall is high, or the rock is Asara Tvachim, it's 10 Tvachim. They're not 4 wide. This is like Rochistav Shemisi. Kana Noah's B'Shus Rabim. You have a pole which is in the street, and Gavaya Sarasva is 10 high. Mutelakan. You can take an item from the top of the pole to a house or to the street. You shouldn't use it as a staging point to take from the house to the street through this pole. That you shouldn't do. Right? It's a mokum patur, right? So why is the Mishnah saying less than that is potter? It's mashma potter from korban, but you shouldn't do it. I mean, it should be permitted, right? The top of a pillar should be a mokum patur, right? There should be no problem. And what are we talking about? Well, below berachavim, the rock or the thing is wide, abba, but like it's not 10 tall. In this situation, did not say look, if people don't walk there, it's called a Karmelis. The bit of rock is not 10 high, but it's 5 high. Are you going to walk through it? You're not going to walk through it. So it's a Karmelis. It's considered a Karmelis. You take something from the street to the Karmelis, you're not chayav, but you shouldn't do it. The Gemara says, even so, it's not a Karmelis. Why not? That which we said, anything that stops people walking is a Karmelis. That's only when it's be'emsa, in the middle of the street, because there it really stops people walking. However, when it's on the side of the street, and people aren't really walking there anyway, Rishus Harabim mevatalta. It's nullified to the Rishus Harabim. It's treated as Rishus Harabim. You hear that? People anyway might dig a pit on the side of the street. So therefore, it's part of the street. Although it's 4 tvachim high, on the side of the road, it's part of the street. And you're allowed to take something between it and the street. Oh, Rabbi Yochanan, let's count potter. He said, don't have the wording potter, which is mashma potter from korban. We should do it. Ela muta, he said it's permitted. Tamon Zanina, a new sugya now. We've learned. Amaf is morasa. breaking a boil, which has got pus and things inside, for Shabbos. If you want an entrance so the air comes in to heal the wound, you are chayiv, you're liable. To remove the pus and so on, you don't care whether it closes up, you are potter. Less can potter. Don't take the word potter there. Don't have the word potter. It's much for potter from carbon. And a mutter, it is absolutely permitted. It's more when you have a case of pain and everything, Now, similarly, Tamotaninan, Asad Nachash for Shabbos, hunting a snake on Shabbos, if you're doing it, you don't want the snake to bite you, potter. You need it for medicine, you're chayav, from lachav hunting. Potter, take out the word potter, Ela mutter, it is permitted to stop the snake biting you, it is permitted. We've also learned, and lefosim iranios, these are pots of the townspeople, shein tahiris ba'ala mace. Now they are tahor, they're earthenware vessels which don't receive tumah from the inside, only from the outside, only from the inside. So if they're sealed and in the house with a dead body, there's no tumah can get inside it, right? But tmeis b'masa azav, they are tameh if a zav carries it. Amrav zira, but yos. And it's right that you should have the gear size there. With hunting, for example, if you're hunting an animal for a purpose, you're liable. There's no purpose, you're potter. Now the same is hadada taninan, like that which we learned in Idias. If you're involved in this hunting, so the snake shouldn't bite you, you're potter. In l'refuah, and if you're doing it for the hunting l'refuah, then you're chayav. But if that's the case, why does the Mishnah in Idias say hunting is potter, only if you're doing it, it shouldn't bite you? I mean, you should have said you're potter anyway. You have no tzorech. You have no need for the hunting. It must be take out the word potter. Ela mutter. It must be as permitted. Okay, right. Hazorek. Carry on. Yeah. Hazorek arba amas b'kaisel. You throw an item 4 amas in the street and it lands on the face of the wall. Above 10 tfachim on the ground. This is halacha gimel, Above 10 tfachim on the ground is for the street. It's gazorek ba'avir. It's gone in the airspace and you're potter. But if it lands on the wall, lemata me'asar tfachim, below 10 tfachim from the ground, gazorek ba'aretz is like throwing it on the ground. Gazorek ba'aretz arba amas, 4 amas in the street is chayiv. So if it lands below 10, you're chayiv. If it lands on the wall above 10, you are potter. Zorak, if you throw an item and you wanted it to land l'toich arba amas, you wanted it to land within 4. But it's galga chus l'arba amas, it went rolled out 4, you're potter. Chus l'arba amas, you wanted it to go 4, but it's galga l'toich arba amas, it went within 4, you are chayiv. Masnisi. Now the Mishnah is talking about b'she'ein sham. Now what are we talking about here? You're throwing something 4 amas in the street, it lands on the wall. If it's above 10, you are potter. Masnisi b'she'ein sham chayiv. This is when there is no hole above 10 where the item can land. However, if there is a hole and the item lands inside it, whether we can scratch away at this hole and make a 4x4 area. If we can do that, 4x4 thick, right? If we can make a 4x4 hole out of this wall, or we can't, imagine it's scratched out. And we have an area of 4x4. We have a virtual 4x4. And if you throw there, you're liable. Because you've thrown from the street to a virtual house that we've made up in this wall. If there is 4 and 4, we imagine it's scratched out. But if they do not have the shear 4x4, we do not treat this wall as if it's scratched out. We imagine it's sort of all closed up. The Mishnah says stam. Stam Mishnah is Rameh. So the item did not land in a hole. So who said what again? So we're saying if there's a hole, it's machlekes. Rameh holes, whether there is 4x4 or even there isn't 4x4. You imagine that we could scratch out 4x4. You hear that? Rameh says we imagine there is a 4x4 there, even though there isn't. But according to Rabbanan, no. If there is a 4x4, we can scratch it out and imagine it's scratched out. If there isn't, then we can't. Now, the Mishnah spoke about throwing on a wall below 10, and it's not talking about a case where the item lands in the hole in the wall. Where did the item land? Where you chayiv? It's talking about a wall which is slanting, and the item landed on the slant within 10 of the ground. Now, if it's slanty, ain't so for later, this item's going to fall down. Rav Chia b'shem Rav Yochanan, Tifta took my case, it was a fat, juicy, sweet fig, which just sticks to the wall. Shahaisa devela shemena, v'hini tucha, it'll go flat. Follow? It's not going to fall down. Now, we had a sugya in climb, and we're talking there about 2 rows of vines. One's higher than the other. One's lower land, one's a bit higher up on the hill or whatever it is. And the question is how they're joining up for a vineyard. Rabbi Elazar said you have 1 row in the ground and 1 on a step. If it's 10 tfachim higher, it doesn't join to be a kerem. Okay? He said if it's higher, what does it mean if it's higher? Does it mean the row of vines are higher? Does it mean the land is higher? And nafka minas is where you planted the higher row and you don't have 10 tfachim between the lower row. Do you require the rows shouldn't join up, that there should be a gap of maybe 10 tefachim between them, and there is or there isn't, or it's enough that the step should be 10 tefachim from the lower ground? Yeah, Rav Chaga by Kum Rav Yisa, Les Hada Amra, surely the Mishnah in Shabbos, that Mishnah tells us, Shishipua Madrega Kiramatan, that the slant is like below. The Mishnah is Mechayev, one who throws the fig in the street, and it went 4 amas and landed on the wall, as if it's landed on the ground in the street. And now the same thing with Kalayim. We should say that the thing on the slant should be like the ground underneath it. They should join up to be a vineyard. Amalei said Tamam. The rows of the vines, Zoim Nerim and Madriga. The vines get nourishment from the slanty ground, and they are rooted in it, and they're not going to fall to the ground. But here, but you always rub yourself against a nice fig on the wall, right? Yeah, you'll rub yourself against it. You've got a bit of mud on your shoe or something, and through this, he knows fellas is going to fall on the ground, and that's why we treat it as if it's in the street. Now, if the Mishnah said it's talking about a case where there's a hole in the wall, the thing went in the hole, and the item benefits from the hole because it's there secure and it's not going to fall. Just like the seeds get benefit from the ground, from the slant, from the hill, they don't fall. Then you could have learned from our Mishnah that the slant is like below. But as we said, the Mishnah is not talking about that. It's talking about where it's stuck on the wall, and therefore don't compare it to a row of vines which is planted, on the slant, and don't conclude that the slant is like below and connect the 2 rows. So here's again a typical example of comparing an idea of 2 rows in a vine to your flattering fig which is on the wall. But there we are. Now, the Gemara pushed away Rav Chisda's din that the Mishnah is talking about a case where the item splashes on the wall is on a slant. Because the item's going to fall down. So then the Gemara brings another pirush from Rav Shem Rav Yochanan. The Gemara bring other Amoraim who argue, and they say Rav Yochanan explained the Mishnah like Rav Chisda. Rav Yosef Rav Shem Rav Yochanan. The area of the wall was slanted like a midrain, like on a slant, and the item landed on the slant. Now your eye is going to roll down, but you're still high. And the din is kadana taninan, like we learned in the Sefer of the Mishnah. Zarak chus la'arba amas. If you throw an item more than 4 amas, and then when it's galga, it rolled the back within 4 amas, you are liable, chayav. You threw it, will be beyond 4, and then it started coming backwards, and therefore came within 4. That's the condition that the item rested a bit beyond the 4 before it started rolling backwards. And since the Sefer's Mechayev Mishnah was Zarek, even if the item rests on that area where it's going to fall, so also the ratio we can Mechayev the Zarek, when he throws something, it lands on the wall on an angle, even though it's going to come back and fall from it. So Rabbi Shchizkiah said it's got to be Shanacha. It must have stopped about beyond 4 before rolling back. Okay? To be continued, Rabbi Sai. Yeah?